Prairie Plains Resource Institute has been more or less a partner of the park since 1982, and it was really one of our first projects to start doing natural history interpretation here. The park is one of the biggest parks along the Platte River in Nebraska, and it's got probably more variety than most state or local parks along the river. In fact, probably many state and local parks in the state, because it has extensive tallgrass prairie, the Wood River up here, over a half mile of running stream, the Platte River down here, a lot of sand pits and wetlands and forest. Anybody else? Okay. This is a bench dedicated to a neighbor of mine who was known in Aurora as the Bird Lady, Blanche Swanson. And it was, she and her husband were on the ground floor of the establishment of the park in 1973. So at that time, this was kind of a wayside area, a beer drinking area. The Chapman Bridge was, it's really weird to think of it back then, but I went to high school in Aurora and the Chapman Bridge seemed like this distant, you know, place. Occasionally you'd out hunting or something, you'd cross over, but it seems like things are so much more immediate these days. A lot of people's, back then, you know, Hampton, Marquette, they were kind of foreign lands, and they were 9 miles away. What makes the park so neat, though, is you've got the camping, the beautiful cottonwood canopy over the campground. You've got these sandpit lakes, beautiful forest and shrub, great diversity of habitat for wildlife and nature study. And with 270 acres, you have expanse, so you don't have to be crowded next to anybody. You can camp out in the wilds to get away from people. There's very little crowd anyhow, given the space. And you can hike, probably 4 or 5 miles of trails when they're all done. Most of them are done now. So it's an amazing resource in a place that doesn't have much public land. Garter snakes exude a smelly substance from their vent, which makes them less pleasant to pick up because of the smell, but it's not bad. Now, red-sided garters, he's not a bright one, but you can see the red. They can get very territorial and nasty, more so than the smaller garter. And he's okay. I mean, he's not striking or anything, but sometimes they'll raise up in front of a vehicle and hiss, and their head will get fat, and they'll get in their threatening posture. That's a pretty good sized red-sided garter. So when Larry said bull snake, he was probably reacting to the size. However, bull snake would be patterned with a patterned tail, but it's a neat snake. They're very common along the Platte River. This particular one moved pretty fast. He almost looks like he's got something inside, like a frog or something. And they'll shed a skin, almost just crawl out of the skin. But this one's very docile now.
Garter snake gives life to birds.
This is western spiderwort. It's very common throughout the sand hills and loves sandy soils. This one here the leaves have been eaten off or mowed off early. The name spiderwort comes from kind of when you pull a leaf off, you get a gooey kind of net, spider webby kind of material. That's why it gets its name. Very beautiful, delicate blossoms. With the rains we've been having, these will bloom. Almost everything here is native Other parts of the forest we have terrible weed issues with certain shrubs, but not at Bader Park really. Our Bader Park's weeds are mostly river plants. Now it's Phragmites, purple loosestrife, reed canary grass. We'll point those out. A guy cut off a 10-inch branch of cedar and counted almost 500 berries. So they really spread fast. And that tree with all the white berries probably has thousands and thousands. And the robins and other birds will spread them rapidly. The berries are actually a pine cone covered with flesh, so they're a cone. They're actually a conifer. This was a dike created between the sand pits when they mined and the river. That was customarily done. So it's a good walking trail. We'll probably see some or hear some common birds. You're hearing house wrens now.
Red-headed woodpecker right there.
Oh yeah, up high there's another one.
No, the one that flew away.
Okay, so they probably have a nest cavity in there somewhere. But that story was neat because I knew the red-headed woodpecker from going to Horde Lake over by Central City. It was one of the few birds I knew. Here we'll have a lot of thrashers and catbirds. A lot of times, unless the catbird is doing that meowing sound, I can't distinguish the song that well. Catbirds are usually near water, probably in the 1600s or so, but they spread rapidly throughout North America. And birds spread them. Indians probably gravitated to them quite quickly because of the food source. They're kind of a weedy tree. Not kind of, they are a weedy tree. Reproduce rapidly on open ground. Birds carry so many of them. They don't live very long though, and they are a nice wildlife tree. These are starting to ripen now, starting to darken, so this tree will just be Grand Central Station for catbirds and thrashers and all kinds of birds. Catbirds especially love them. A lot of fruit. You've got a layering of habitat. And in wildlife or in bird watching, this is one of the things you look for because it means you can find stuff here. You'll have opening areas where the birds have access to the ground. Then you'll have shrub layer, and then you'll have a medium height tree layer maybe, and maybe the tall canopy. But this is just a pretty area. You could expect to come by here and see a lot of songbirds and migrating sparrows. And this is a little different when you turn and look back this way. You get a whole different, less shrubby, more open ground, basically one tree height. And the one tree height, except for cedars here, which are yet smaller than back here, this all grew from accretion land where there was nothing. And all the cottonwoods came out of the same year class. So consequently, all the cottonwoods are the same height, for the most part. And they're probably about 50 years old. Okay, now song sparrow song is varied. You can't go by the phrasing, you go by the tonality. And that kind of a busy, bright, but also they're near water. So, as I say every year, that bird probably had his territory staked out in mid-March. Right here, next to water in the shrubbery. Imagine the nest is probably in that shrubbery, maybe close to the ground. I'm not sure about their nests. Mourning doves. Is everybody accustomed to the incessant loud song of the eastern or the collared dove, Asian collared dove? Boy, they're outside of our window in the morning and they're just so loud. They just moved into the area about 5 years ago.